Advanced Canvas. Now, I don't know if I'm looking at the list. I don't think I saw many of you for the intro to Canvas, but when I did the intro to Canvas, I said that it wasn't going to be a nuts and bolts of how to use Canvas. It was more of a how would I use it to enhance my classroom. The same thing with the Advanced Canvas. We're going to talk about the pedagogical aspects of using some of these features, but because they are more advanced, we are going to get into a little more of the nuts and bolts of things. If there's something that we covered today that you miss, you guys know how to find us, una@asu.edu. We're on the employee website. We're pretty accessible. So if there are any questions after the webinar, please feel free to contact us and let us know. So today we're going to cover adding rubrics, teaching with multiple instructors or graders, student collaboration tools, and using Google Docs and Canvas. Now, I'm not sure if everyone is aware, but we actually have a guest presenter from UTO who's going to be doing a very specific Google training about Google in your classroom and in Canvas, and it was originally scheduled for December 12th, but because of faculty training is what I understood, somebody let me know, we have moved it to December 14th, so that's the Friday, and it will still be via Zoom, so I'm hoping more of you can attend. You can see more of that information here on our employee website. Here's the link. I'll send out this presentation afterwards. These links are live, so you can go there and then go to our training calendar, and you'll be able to see how to register for that. Just a quick show of hands. How many of you have already visited our website on the employee site? Just type in yes, or there should be like a hands raised or something. I'm just curious to see how many of you use that resource. So while you're chatting in there, I also want to point out another resource that's available through Canvas and is free for everybody at ASU. It's the community guide from Canvas. And you can see from the image here, instructor, student, admin probably isn't as applicable, but you can definitely send your students there if they have questions. And also for yourself if you want to learn more about things. And what's nice about this is that it is a Canvas moderated site. So although people do, put in feature requests and things like that, the final word on there is from Canvas, and you can see it'll say official guide and updated by, so it's a really good resource. I would advise all of you to bookmark it. And actually during the presentation, I'll be referring back to the links that come from this guide. And one more quick check. Can everybody see my screen? Does everyone see the Canvas guide screen up here right now? Again, put that in the chat if you would help me out there, please. All right, thanks you guys. You guys are quick. This is awesome. We should have like the quickest finger typing back or something. Thanks so much. All right, so let's talk about adding rubrics to your course. So now rubrics, I think we're all fairly familiar with what they do, what they are. They can be used as a grading tool for you as the instructor, and if you have multiple instructors in a course, that way the grading is standardized. You can also use it as a tool for your students so that they understand the expectations of a particular assignment or paper or something that they're supposed to do. So it's very important as you're building out your rubric in Canvas to keep these things in mind. You can you can add a rubric to a discussion and an assignment. You can reuse a rubric, but there are some rules around that we'll talk about. You can store them within your course shell, and what's nice is that once you have stored a rubric and it's associated with your login, any course that you go to, you'll be able to pull that rubric again. And the next point on here is, this is where you really need to start thinking about what you're trying to do with this rubric. Is it a grading tool? Because you can assign it to something that has points. Is it a peer review tool? In which case there are no points on the rubric. Is it a student guidance tool? Again, there'll be no points. And it might be a 0-point assignment as well. And we'll talk about more about these things, but as you're listening to the presentation today, think about how you might use your rubrics in your classroom. I do also want to point out, we're going to use the word outcomes in this presentation. It is a feature in Canvas. And rubrics and outcomes are slightly different. So you can have a rubric, it's typically at the assignment level, and outcomes are typically at the course or program level. So you could have these overarching, like your course objectives, those would become the outcomes, and then you can have specific assignments with rubrics, and you can tie the outcomes, I'm sorry, you can tie the elements within your rubric to outcomes for your course. I just want to make that distinction because we will be using both of those terms. I'm talking very quickly. If there are any questions, please feel free to chat them in. Let's talk about how you can add a rubric. Now, adding a rubric, again, you have to think about what it is you're trying to do and what your personal workflow is. Like everything else in Canvas, there are multiple ways to do everything. You can add the rubric directly from the assignment or discussion that you're building the rubric for, or if we go back to this overarching concept of outcomes in the course, you can build all your rubrics and then assign them out as needed. So let's go ahead and look at how we would do that. I'm switching over screens. If you can't now see my Canvas window, please let me know. If not, I'm just going to keep going. So let's say I'm writing an assignment. I've figured out what it is I want the students to do, and I decide, you know what, it would be, thanks Pam for letting us know, it would be really helpful if I gave the students an idea of what they had to do for this assignment. So I want to add a rubric. So let's go here. Here's my assignment. I've already got it, you know, built out. There's everything is there, the due date and everything. Now I want to add the rubric. So a few things I want to point out here before we click that plus rubric button. A graded assignment does not mean that there are points assigned to it. So although here you can see there are no points assigned to this assessment or paper, it is still called a graded assignment. That means that when I look in the grade center, I'll be able to see that students have either done it or not done it. They'll either have a dashed line or they'll have a 0. And this is important because you want to make sure, especially for discussions that we talk about next, you do have a graded event. So keep that in mind. You can have a graded assignment with no points attached. Yeah, I just blew your mind there, I know. So now let's click the plus rubric button. This is where we can go ahead and add the rubric. So as soon as I click the plus rubric, I get this window here where I can actually now start adding the content. I can list my criterion. So, you know, plus here, sorry. I'll put a new criterion, description, student followed instructions. So they put their name, date, whatever. So this is my first criterion. I can give it points. I can give it a rating title. So good job, you know, or rating description. I can change this to 6 points, you know, whatever I want to do, and so on. I'll just build it out. It's very similar to if you built a rubric in Blackboard, how you went and put in the content, then you put the points. And, you know, if you want to have more than 2 categories for this particular criterion, you just click plus, and you would go ahead and add those. You don't have to have the same number of ratings for each criterion. Just want to make that clear. And if I don't want this one, I can take it out as well. So I really only have, students here only have to do one thing in this paper, put their name and their date, and then they get the 6 points. Below that, I have some options as well. So these comments that I've entered, you know, good job, all those will appear. But if I also want to write comments, I can do that. Let's say this is just for students to figure out how to write a paper, so I don't need to add points to it. The outcomes learning mastery, I would ignore that for now. We don't have learning mastery set up yet in any of our courses, and I'm not going to get into it. It's a big topic. You can see I have these 2 options. I'm going to take that out. As soon as I took remove points from rubric, I obviously lost the option to use this rubric for assignment grading, and I lost the option to hide the score total because I'm removing the points. So again, this is where you have to really think about what is it that your rubric is going to do. So at this point, I could click create rubric. And now when you see when a student will go to this assignment, they'll have the rubric information right there in front of them. And then when you go to grade it, you'll see that rubric as well when you're grading it. Let's go to one of those. So the student has uploaded a Word doc. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong assignment. I'm going to go here to my test student. And I just went ahead and added more comments. And I'm actually looking at the wrong one, so you can't see my rubric. But if I was showing you the correct one, and I had correctly put an assignment in, your rubric would show up here, and then you would just enter your grades. So I'm sorry about that, I slipped up there. But this is how you would use your rubric in the end to show how you can then assign your points so students can see exactly where they're earning or losing points. So that is one way of adding your rubric. You'll notice that when I click that rubric button, it said here also find a rubric. Now, all of a sudden now, I'm looking through all the rubrics that I'm going to say in air quotes, own. These are all the courses where I have rubrics. And I can actually go back and pick from another course some other rubric that I really liked. I can say some rubric here, and I can use this rubric. And now this rubric will now instead be attached to this assignment, and it's ready to go. So that's the first way. So that's if you're like doing your assignment and you now want to add the rubric. Let's talk about if we were to use it from the outcome side. So if you look in your course, as the instructor, you'll have this list of links on the side. And some of them are, regular. You can see regular color. You can read them quite easily. I'm going to show you right now where the rubric is stored. But now you can see some of these grayed out things. Look for one of the grayed out things called outcomes. Again, outcomes are those overarching course or program objectives. But you'll notice when I clicked outcomes, and I came to this outcomes page, there's a thing here that says manage rubrics. And I click that manage rubrics. And here is where I can now start adding rubrics, and I can create them from here as well. So the question, where is this rubric stored? It's stored here in this outcomes page is where you can pull it out from. It's stored within your account. So anytime you go to add a rubric in a course, as long as you have access to those courses as an instructor, any rubric that you've built will become available as soon as you click find. So here I am again in outcomes. These are the course rubrics. I can even add another rubric and create it just the same way that I did for the assignment. And it'll be available for me to use in one assignment or several. There are some caveats about using it in several assignments. If you use it in more than one assignment and you want to change some criteria, Canvas will not let you do that because it's going to say, hey, you've used it already here and students have submitted things, so you can't really change that rubric. In which case, all you do is copy that rubric and then put it in. This is something that I think is easier. If you come and talk to us, we can show you really how to do the copy and some of the nuances that go with it. If not, Lucy has put the community guide link in there. You can look at that as well. Any questions about that? If you want to share a rubric with another instructor, what you'd have to do is go here, again, the link here, and click on people, and add the instructor as an instructor in your course with that rubric that you want. And now that they're an instructor in your course, that rubric is available to them. So one more time, let's talk about where the rubrics are stored. Click the Outcomes tab, click Manage Rubrics, and then your rubrics are listed right here. The other way that you can access your rubrics is directly from your assignment. Let's do that here. Let's go to an assignment. I already have a rubric here. Let's edit. Let's go to an assignment I haven't written. So what I'm doing now is showing you how to access the rubric via an assignment. Let's see if I have one that doesn't have a rubric. have a rubric here, that's okay. When you go to an assignment that you don't have a rubric, you'll have a plus rubric button right there in your assignment, and then you can either rewrite the rubric the way I have it here. There'll be a little magnifying glass or a search button, find another rubric, and now all the rubrics that you own appear just like when you went through outcomes. So you can go through outcomes and find your rubrics. You can look for your rubrics from the assignment itself. So if any more questions on that, please feel free to chat that in. Now you can also assign a rubric to a discussion, but just remember I was telling you about this graded versus non-graded. Make sure your discussion is set up as a graded discussion. Again, it doesn't have to have any points if you don't want it to, but if you do want it to have a rubric, it has to be a graded discussion, and you would do that when you're making your discussion. Put in your discussion information, and then here it's graded. So what I'm doing right now is I'm going to show you how to add a rubric to a discussion board. The first thing you have to do is make sure that your discussion board is graded. I'd look for that option here when I'm editing or building the discussion board. I click graded, and I do save, and now the discussion board will allow me to add a rubric. To add a rubric in a discussion board, I click this button. Now, I've heard it called multiple things. There's snowman, there's burger, there's snowman, there's vertical ellipses. I call it the 3 dots, whatever you want to call it is great. But when I click that button, not the edit button, but this little 3 dots here on the side, and you can see now I have the option to add that rubric. Same thing, I'll get that same window. I can go ahead and edit and add rubrics the same way. I can go ahead and click here, find a rubric. Same thing that I see when I do an assignment. So once you click that add a rubric, the process is the same whether you're going to add it for an assignment or for a discussion. So just keep that in mind, that you want to make sure that those things are graded. Okay, so that's what I have for adding rubrics to your Canvas course. Again, when you get the slide deck here, you'll have the community guide links. You can read more about it, but I've taken most of the information from there over here. And as always, if you have more questions, feel free to let us know.